First, we'll go into the Create Asset app to create the asset under construction. Using asset class 4000. I don't need a cost center or anything else at this stage, so I'll just save it with a description. I'm also going to create 2 final assets, although in practice you probably create this at a later stage when the final asset is brought into use. I'm creating 2 individual cars with just the minimum fields filled for the purpose of this example, i.e. the description of each, plus a cost center. So this is the second car. Next, I'll post the values to the asset using the integrated asset acquisition process. In other words, I'll simply post an invoice against the asset under construction. I enter the dates and invoice references and the vendor number on the first line. Of course, I could have created a purchase order and goods receipt first, but this example is more to illustrate the settlement process between the asset under construction and the final asset. And the amount on the next screen. Then I enter the posting key 70 and the asset under construction number. As it's not easy to see the asset that I want, I have to first cancel the personal list so that I can see all the assets. I could also have just typed in the number manually. I enter the transaction type, 100 for asset acquisition, and then on the next screen I'm going to enter the amount again. And then the tax code and the tax jurisdiction, as this is a US company code. I then click on Post, and you can see the posted document number in the bottom left of the screen. Next, I'll create the distribution rule by going into the app-defined distribution rules. Transaction in the GUI is AIAB. The correct asset under construction number is already there, so I just press Execute. I then choose the 2 lines that I want and go to Maintain the Settlement Rules screen. I enter FXA in the first line as I want to settle to a fixed asset. And choose the first final asset that I created. To make it easier to find, I'll restrict the search to my company code and the asset class for vehicles. I then create a second line, but this time I type in the second asset number rather than search for it. I enter a split of 30% to one asset and 70% to the other. I go back one step to the line items, which have now gone green to show they've been assigned. And then I save and click on the settlement button at the top to do the settlement. I check the test and detail are selected and then press execute. You can see that there are debits of 900 to the first car and 2,100 to the second, for both the leading ledger and for the parallel ledger. I'll then click on Simulate, where you can see for the leading ledger there are 2 credits to the asset under construction and 1 debit to each of the new assets. I could also switch to the parallel ledger to check that as well if I wanted to. I go back 2 steps to take off the test run and to re-execute the transaction and post the final settlement. I then go into the Asset Values app to see the asset values in the Asset Explorer. It shows the last asset automatically, and you can see the acquisition transaction at the bottom, which will be the same in the other final asset. I then switch to the asset under construction, and you can see the initial transaction for acquisition and then the 2 retirement transactions as they're settled to the final assets.